Hi, Liz.
Hi, Simon.
How you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
It's good to see you. Now, Liz, you're a GP, and we spoke to Matt Doyle as well, and Matt showed us how to use adrenaline injector pens, and got links to all of that sort of stuff in the way that you can do on these videos. But you've also got an interest in allergies, haven't you? And they're doing a PhD, which is very interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I'm doing a part-time PhD at Southampton University, and that's on young people and anaphylaxis, self-management, digital intervention. So it's really looking at how we can help support people with anaphylaxis, which, as you know, it's quite a tricky thing to have anaphylaxis or to be at risk of it, because it's quite a hard thing to define, and it's quite a hard thing to recognise, and it's quite a hard thing to listen with, to live with. But I think it's something that we should look at in a positive regard as to how do we make the best of the situation? How do we live in a way that our lives aren't too constrained, but that we take the necessary precautions, and we know how to live and to advocate.
Now, I can cast my mind back a very long time and almost remember, that kind of 18, 19-year-old rebellious, leaving home, doing your own thing. I mean, it's really difficult, isn't it, then to kind of remember at that age to take your adrenaline pens with you, do the right thing. You're meeting presumably new friends and you're doing new things, going out, socializing, going to restaurants on your own. There's a lot of responsibility still, isn't there? And that's all new, presumably, if your parents have been kind of looking after you as a younger child.
Yeah, I think you're right, Simon. So if you think about it, when you look at how health services are delivered, we look about transition services, and it's readying people to get ready for self-management. But let's just look about all the other things, interesting things that are happening at that age. And I
Mm.
think it's an age where we should really sort of, people are very curious. They're starting to enjoy their life. The personalities are starting to form more. And so it's something you should sort of treat that time with a certain sort of reverence, because you don't get that time again. The difference you've got if you happen to have food allergy is that you just need that little bit more of awareness of the risks that might be out there. I'm a great believer that society should also be helping you here as well, that there should be better rules and laws about regulations and food labeling, and we're really lucky that the Allergy Research Foundation have got a headway in that. So
Yeah.
if you're going out to a restaurant, wouldn't it be great if the waiter or waitress actually has that understanding, and you have a relaxed conversation about it, and that you're able to have that advocacy and to declare it, but feel as though you're going to be listened to and not considered to be an inconvenience. The other thing about what the types of things that you start to do in adolescence is you want to go out with your friends, don't you? And
Yeah, of
it's
course.
that's quite tricky to explain
Yeah.
what your condition might be, uh, what um, what you might need to carry, how and when to use an adrenaline device. I know that you've had a conversation with Matt Doyle about that, and he'll be doing some more demonstrations. So there's all sorts of things to prepare someone to feel confident. Now, one of the things that some people aren't aware of is something called cofactors. Now, do you know what a cofactor is, Simon?
No, no, I don't. Tell me.
Okay, so there
I
you go.
feel as though I should, but so
Well,
educate
we'll
me.
after today. There are, the experts may phrase it slightly differently, but here's my understanding, fairly basic. But like a cofactor is something that can augment or make a reaction more severe. Okay. Now, it just so happens that cofactors might be something like exercise. So, what are the adolescent groups doing? What are the young people doing? They love exercise
Love
and
the gym.
physical.
Love the
Yeah,
gym.
but
Yeah.
they might not know potentially that if they just were unlucky and then ate a trigger food that they were allergic to, that might make their anaphylaxis worse. And there's also things like stress. There's also things like alcohol. So if you happen to have a night out where you go and play your football first, then have a beer down the pub, and then you eat something by mistake, you've got some cofactors in there that just might make things worse. Now, I'm not saying that you should avoid those activities, because that's part of people's life. That's what we want to do. But I think they should have an awareness of that certain cofactors can make a reaction a little bit worse. And probably if you're going out with your friends, just as you said, all these things that you need to do, you might be wanting some peer support there. So you might be wanting them to know about your allergy, and actually know how these pens work, know that of course you need to carry them. And there's probably a gap in the market, Simon, for a device that's easy to carry. Like, how do 2 adrenaline devices fit into the back pocket of your jeans? They don't really, do they?
Yeah.
So,
Wouldn't it be
there's something.
great if they were a lot smaller, a lot easier to
Yes,
carry? And yeah.
there's all sorts of design things there. Some of the ones in America used to talk you through. I think they might have been withdrawn, but there's all sorts of clever design engineers that could help us
Yeah,
here.
I totally
But
agree. I'll tell you what, Liz, if they were the shape of a mobile phone,
yeah,
wouldn't have any problem encouraging people to carry them.
no, they wouldn't. And actually, because the one thing I always say to my son, who's 23 now, but as he used to go out the door, what do you say to them, Simon? Have you got your key? Have you got your mobile phone? So those are the 2 things that fairly essential. And most I would say, happy to be challenged on this, teenagers would think they're quite important. If your pens happen to be, if there was some way that they could be attached to that, and that's why I'm quite interested in the digital work as to whether you could carry your action plan on your phone, whether that might act as another alert. So there's some engineering work here, engineers if they're out there that could maybe give people a hand with that, or the companies themselves.
Yeah, no, that I totally agree. I think that would be great, wouldn't it? As well, it's the kind of cumbersome pens themselves, but also having to carry 2.
Yeah, and do you know why you need to carry 2?
We talked with this to Matt about this, but let's hear again.
Well, what did he say to you?
Well, it was just in case one doesn't work, one misses, we use one wrong, but also, the majority of times the first one is going to work, but in a very small number of times it may not work.
Precisely. You see, you got that right. So you need to carry 2 now. The MHRA have done a recent report on this and the importance. So me as a healthcare professional, I need to be prescribing 2. And there's some, because in younger children, we sometimes do 4 because you've got 2 at home and 2 on the way to school or in school. So but the majority of adults are 2, and some people feel reassured by having a lot more in different places. But the point about this, Simon, is that it's really important to have it to hand. So you don't really want it in the glove box in your car. You don't want it in your office filing cabinet. You want it on you, and you want it on you because of the speed that anaphylaxis can progress. So you don't
want to be running across the field, or you don't want to be running across the, I don't know, the university campus or whatever to go and get it either, do you?
No, you don't. So you want to be carrying them, and you want to know how and when to use them. And this is another thing that's quite a difficult thing to get across in all age groups. And the how and when to use them is difficult because anaphylaxis can present quite fast. And also sometimes the symptoms, for instance, the breathing symptoms can be confused with asthma, particularly if you've got like a background asthma. People often think their asthma is just getting worse. If for instance, they haven't recognized that they might have eaten something on a trigger food. So the how and when to use them is very important to get through to parents that are looking after that person, or the young person themselves as they're developing, or their peers. And another thing that young people tend to do, and Hazel Gowland gave me this tip, is that you're embarrassed if you think you're having a reaction. There's something about embarrassment. And so Matt, I'm sure, will be talking about that, you need to be lying down if you can. If there's a bit of breathing problems or you're vomiting, then you might be sitting up, but not to sit up very quickly. And obviously then consciously you're in the recovery position. But sometimes young people tend to go off to the toilets by themselves if they're thinking they're having a reaction. That might not be a great idea. You don't want to be standing up in the cubicle, okay? You actually want to be lying down on the floor with your friends there, because the position is really important and people need to know what's happening. You need to be asking for help, and you need to be using your adrenaline and using it fast. So there's something about scenario training here, Simon, that's really important, and the family can do that, and that we as healthcare professionals can talk through a situation of, well, what happens if you might have a reaction in the restaurant or on the playing field or you're in the nightclub? What are you going to do? Because your first instinct is to be a bit embarrassed and try and sort it out yourself. But actually, it's probably more important and safer for other people to be there supporting you.
And as you said, it may not come on straight away. So if you're in the, you're out having your a meal with your friends or having a beer, and then a couple of hours later you're down the gym, it may come on there. It's a different set of friends, or you might be there on your own. It's that embarrassment and being just singled out, isn't it, if something happens? But you know, to be able to manage that situation it's life-saving, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. So we say that anaphylaxis is potentially life-threatening. Fortunately, Simon, there's about there's not a significant number of fatalities. There's about 20 in the UK, but every death you would hope could be, is a tragedy, is an absolute
Absolutely.
tragedy.
Yes.
So the thing that people are living with is that the rates of anaphylaxis we think are increasing, but it's one of those things that's very difficult to define because some people, we look at hospital admissions and we say, okay, is that telling us about anaphylaxis? But quite a lot of people, Simon, have anaphylaxis at home and they don't go in. So we don't actually know the numbers, and we've got these anaphylaxis registries and they're telling us more. But the point I'm trying to get across, Simon, is actually what people are living with is that uncertainty. It's the uncertainty of a severe reaction. And although they may know that the fatality is unlikely, they might be thinking, who's to say it's not me? And that's quite a hard thing to live with, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah. And particularly at that age when, you kind of your perceptions on the future and the life and your hopes and it kind of concentrates, doesn't it? And I'm sure does it when you in the conversations that you have with the young people, does it something that comes out in conversation with them, about all of that anxiety and all of that concern?
I think you can have different levels of anxiety. I think you probably need a bit of anxiety because you do need to check the labels and you need to be prepared. So there's a healthy amount, but then that anxiety can become a bit of a problem if you get intrusive thoughts or it becomes overwhelming. So it's dealing with the right amount of anxiety. And as healthcare professionals, I'm not sure we ask that question enough, or that we have time in the consultations to. So perhaps we should be making more time. Now, there's some really good psychologists that are involved in allergy, Rebecca Nib, Audrey Dungalvin, and there's Polly as well. There's lots of new people coming into this field and very established ones that are actually attached to different departments and can help people have longer conversations, whether that's the parents or the young person. Because if you have had a significant reaction, some people, they explain something called a feeling of impending doom. And you don't forget that. You don't forget that very quickly, Simon. So you may be carrying something that was very frightening. So there's something about working with that anxiety, but there's also something about let's talk through how you can be prepared, which is a scenario training, which might actually be connecting you to a peer support group or somebody has established allergies and there you are a little bit younger and they've told you how they go about living their lives. And part of that is training, working out how to self-advocate and the self-efficacy. I always say, make sure your mobile phone is charged. If somebody comes in to see me, I ask to see the adrenaline device. And I ask to see it basically because I want to check it's in date. I want to check they know how to renew it. That they know the thing of prescription and how to renew. You can actually renew with the companies online, so your mobile phone gets a reminder. And that they need to know how and when to use this, which is what the NICE recommends. So there's something about talking to that person because a lot of this planning, Simon, is personalized planning. So I want to know, if you come to me, I want to know about your life, what your social situation is, whether there's anything that you're worried about, in the psychology of allergy, because it can be quite frightening. But what's your hopes? How do you live your day? How do you do trigger avoidance? What's your vocation? What's your education? Yeah, and I know that Anaphylaxis UK are looking about going away to university. I think it's a brilliant thing. That's a fantastic thing to do. So because of this age group are actually, if you're looking, let's take the age group from 11 to 25 because it's quite a big range, young people and adolescents with allergies. But you've got lots of things happening in that time, haven't you? You've got moving schools, then you've got preparing for university, then you've got thinking about what job can I do. And then you've got all these new things they're trying, because really, young people, they need to understand the risk. And I think they're quite sensible when they do understand the risk, but they might not have had that explained to them. They might not have had a reaction for some time because they might have had other people controlling what they're eating. So they might not be able to remember what that reaction was like, or think that things might have got a bit better. So I think actually once they know what the risk is, then they're pretty good at making those informed decisions. But as you said earlier on in this conversation, part of this age group is exploring boundaries and taking some risks. So it's
and sometimes pushing those boundaries quite a lot and taking more risks. And so we often hear of younger people just not taking the pens out because they think, well, it's all right, I'll take that risk.
Yeah, and I think there's two things about that. I'm very keen for them to take it, and that's the scenario training, and maybe their pal saying, "Where's your pen?" Because that's sort of a positive
I think
peer
that's really
pressure.
important. Yeah.
And I've done that with friends of mine, and just saying, "Oh, because sometimes when you look at some of the case fatalities, there's a sequence of events. It's never one thing, and sometimes that person is rushing and they pick up their smart jacket because they're going to a wedding. Whereas the other jacket has the pen in, or they're caught unawares, or that it's out of date because there's something else that happens. So there's something about preparing for all the things that can catch you off guard. So there's and I also think, I don't know how you feel about this. I personally think people should carry their own pens because then it's on them and they can get it quickly. We know about the initiatives in schools. Tell me a bit about what you're doing in schools.
So our Safer Schools program, it's a whole school approach. So we encourage not just the teachers, but all of the staff to have training so that school becomes allergy aware. And part of the courses that we run include lesson plans, assembly plans. There's some handouts for younger children like colouring in and crosswords. So it becomes every day because as equally, I think it's so important that your mates know as well and they kind of accept it. It's easy then to kind of talk about it, but then should something happen, they know what to do as well because if it's if it's your pen, it's in your bag, yes, okay, you need to make sure it's there, but your mates need to rely on you as well to know that your pen's in your bag and that you're carrying it. But so the Safer School program has been super popular. And it's just something that I think I'm very, very passionate about, making sure that children are safe in school. All pupils are safe in school, both for secondary and primary school. But developing, as you referred to there, that university guide now, it's something that I'm very keen to explore. And it's all of those, it's exploring with young people as well to see, what are the challenges? How can we help? How can we help to provide them with the knowledge and the information that maybe, not always they're aware of because mum or dad have gone to them, taken on that responsibility before.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard thing for parents to carry, and there's something about giving them permission to let go when people are ready. When you've helped that person with self-management. I'm also a great believer that society, the Finnish allergy sort of program helped society and communities understand, just like what you're talking about in your school. So why can't, we teach CPR training, for cardiac arrest. I don't particularly have a problem with adrenaline pens being by sitting alongside defibrillators. I know there's certain
Wouldn't that
situations.
be great? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. So you need to be fairly sure when you're using, but there isn't. If you really think somebody's got a reaction, there's not a lot of contraindications, and as a person doing it with the best intent, you'll see from the sites about what people advise. So I think as a community now and a society, we need to be more aware. We need to let people advocate, and I think we need industry on board as well. And this is starting to happen after the tragedies that we've had, because this is a system problem. It's not just it's as I said, there's a thing about taking the wrong jacket on the day, or about being distracted, or perhaps not recognizing it. But if you go in and the labeling's there, or the restaurant people are there, and the community person knows how to react, you've got a better chance. And what I'm passionate about is giving people the best chance, and also making them feel listened to in an empathic way. So I think there's a lot more we can do in primary care for that, but we need time, we need training. And I think healthcare professionals probably need to be trained in motivational interviewing to help people recognise this stage. So some of the work we've been doing, Simon, we've done guidelines for adolescents and young people with EARCI. We've just done a toolkit which helps them look for different things of support. I know Allergy UK have got the Teenage Forum, and what I think would be what I'd really like to see coming from this, Simon, and then I can see that you're starting with this, and this is one of the things you really want to get going with, is people to have trusted resources. And, let's start these conversations going so people know where to look, because often people don't know where to look. They look at things that are quite scary. And as healthcare professionals, we need better training. I'm quite happy to say that I knew very little about allergy and anaphylaxis in my training as a general practitioner. We're trying to put things in to improve that. So, this conversation to me is, how do we make it better for that young person when they go out? And how do we help their parents as well?
What would you say to a parent? I mean, I don't want to kind of list out a load of tips, but what are the top tips that you would advise a parent or suggest to a parent, almost in that kind of letting go and not taking on all of that responsibility? Most young people, when they get to a certain age, they will leave home, and the parent won't have any contact with them. So, they've got to learn, haven't they, on how to do things themselves, and having everything done for them is not necessarily so helpful at a certain age.
Yeah, so I think it's very individual for that person. It's very individual. So they know their children, they're the best experts, and actually they've gone a lot of out of their way to get a lot of information. So there's parent support groups, and quite rightly so. And then probably in the transition process, what happens is in the clinics, you probably be asked as a parent at some point to step out for a while, so your young person can go in and have that conversation. So I think it's really about trust and relationships. And this, I would, some of the basics, like there's medications. It's say something like asthma. You simplify the routine and have reminders.
Yeah.
That's no big. That would be fairly simple. But there's something about really good communication of ensuring that person knows how and when to use the device, the adrenaline device, check that there's no worries about needle phobias, because sometimes that's overlooked, that they know how to advocate in restaurants. Parents are often quite worried about trips away, travel abroad, quite rightly so. There's, there are translation cards, there is advice about airlines. Most parents I know are pretty well read, and they've got a handle on that, and your website and other allergy charity websites give them a lot of information. I think there comes a time, though, and this is part of the scenario training, I think, and the peer support group, where that young person is probably going to be more drawn towards their peer support group than the family, but that's a natural progression. But when you've got something like this, you need to probably keep that communication open, and wonder, ask them how it went when they were starting to go out by themselves, how that travel went. Just keep the lines of communication open. I can say that as a parent of adolescents, that sometimes communication is better and sometimes it isn't. I don't know whether you've had similar findings. And ask for support when you need it, because it's quite hard. I think this is probably another conversation. I know there's a few experts that have this one.
We could talk for a long time, Liz. Let's pursue that on another video. We could talk on different things on this same topic, couldn't we? But it's been great talking with you. I've really learned a lot and enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Simon. So I'm very happy to do any of these again, and I'm sure there's a lot of other colleagues that would be happy to join you as well. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. Take care.
Great. Good to see you.